Vanessa Smith never imagined that pretending to be the girlfriend of a billionaire art collector for 10 minutes would change her destiny forever. Amidst exhibitions and accusations of plagiarism, a stolen symphony would ignite an unexpected romance and an electrifying social revenge. The night brought a humid air over Soho, enveloping the newly opened art gallery in its sophisticated aura. Inside the building, the faint sound of violins mingled with the scent of jasmine, wafting through the open windows, while an elegant group conversed among expensive artworks and cozy lights. Vanessa sought to hide among the pillars, her simple dress still crackling with the shy glow of the lights, her messy bun betraying the nervousness that overwhelmed her. She silently observed the parade of guests, figures she never imagined she would encounter so closely, much less be watched by them. However, the presence of Ryan Miller next to Isabella Johnson stood out like a punch in the gut. Ryan, the ex-boyfriend, wore an impeccable black suit. The vague smile she recognized, but his eyes averted as if they wanted to erase their past there. Beside him, Isabella, the cold socialite, played with her blonde hair, her smile a poison that penetrated Vanessa's soul. The weight of that encounter tightened her chest. Ryan's gaze, a mix of indifference and silent reproach, was allied with the cruel disdain that Isabella cast. Vanessa felt the ground disappear for a moment. She needed to escape that stage where her story had been a public humiliation. An accusation of plagiarism and expulsion from the music school had cost her friends and credibility. Turning around, she almost stumbled upon the unexpected figure of Theo Anderson. He exuded an imposing presence, dressed in a flawless black suit, with his woody fragrance subtly blending with the rainy night air of New York. The sunglasses did not hide the curiosity that sparkled in his grey eyes. "Looks like you need an exit." His voice sounded low, laden with an elegant irony that surprisingly did not make her retreat. Vanessa swallowed the lump in her throat. A desperate plan bubbled in her mind, to ask for help to pretend something that could silence that humiliation for a few minutes. "Can you pretend to be my boyfriend? Just for a few minutes?" The question came out hesitantly, almost a whisper. Theo looked at her for a moment, surprised. "Boyfriend, you want me as a shield against your ex and the gossip?" He laughed, a short but sincere chuckle. 5 minutes, that's it." She averted her gaze, feeling the cold sweat on her palms. A crooked smile curved his lips. "Deal made. 5 minutes." They walked together side by side, an improvised barrier against judgment. Vanessa felt the luxury around her with a mix of fascination and discomfort. Her shoes, worn from countless jobs to afford the little she had, seemed to sizzle against the shiny marble floor. The simple dress contrasted too much with the fine fabrics and sparkling jewelry that glimmered under the yellowish light. As they approached Ryan and Isabella, Vanessa took a deep breath and uttered what she feared the most. "This is my boyfriend, Theo Anderson." A murmur swept through the guests like a cold wind. Eyes turned to her, some incredulous, others malicious. A heavy silence fell between both groups, and Vanessa felt Theo's gaze pierce hers, filled with a mix of challenge and protection. "You're too tense for an improvised role," he commented with an ironic tone. She sighed, a sheepish smile escaping. "And you too arrogant to admit you're enjoying this." His ironic invitation sounded strange to her, but for a moment it pushed away the ghosts and fears. The social distance, which had once seemed an insurmountable chasm, began to take on less threatening contours in that moment, divided between lies and silent truths. Amid the whispers that swept through the hall, "Who is this girl? Is she really his? What game is this?" Theo discreetly held Vanessa's hand, transmitting an unexpected strength. And in that improbable encounter, amidst luxuries and contained applause, the most unusual farce began to play the first notes of a symphony that would change not only the course of their lives, but could rewrite the very history of that society, filled with prejudices, secrets, and second chances. The gallery's clock marked the rhythm of that fleeting moment where two distinct realities touched and where the impossible rehearsed a beginning. Vanessa held Theo's gaze, trying to decipher the man behind that armor of power, and felt, for the first time in a long time, that the excess of appearance could be just a curtain for the truth. The night progressed, and with it, destiny began to compose its totally unpredictable melody. Tell us in the comments which city you are watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel to receive more exciting stories like this. The gallery, once a stage for silent judgments and cutting looks, seemed to gain a new vibe with the unexpected presence of Vanessa and Theo there side by side. The morning after the event, Vanessa tried to erase the burden of that tumultuous encounter from her memory, but it was in vain. Her hands trembled for no apparent reason as routine tightened. The sound of shoes on the asphalt of the suburb, reminding her that the contrast between that luxury and her life was, for her, more than a social chasm. It was a daily struggle for survival and respect. However, destiny had other plans for the two. That same week, a new opportunity made Theo reappear in her life, in a much less formal and infinitely more uncomfortable way for both. An invitation to a private event, exclusive for gallery donors, arrived through the careful hands of Theo's secretary. "Your presence is indispensable." The tone left little room for refusal. On the scheduled day, Vanessa, she gathered all the courage she had left. The dress was more elegant than the one from the previous night, a gift from a friend who insisted on helping her project a different image. The contrast was still striking, but this time she felt a thread of pride stubbornly beginning to emerge. Arriving at the entrance of the event, the intense aroma of fresh flowers mixed with the expensive perfume of the women around her almost overwhelmed her. But she stood firm. Theo appeared in the main hall before she could get lost among the guests. His suit, now without a tie, revealed less of the shadow of the reserved and ironic man she was beginning to know. He smiled, small and genuine, upon seeing her. "I didn't expect you to accept my invitation," he commented, his voice husky as he extended his arm to accompany her. "I didn't expect you to pay for my company," she retorted, pointing out the sarcastic tone, but unable to hide the warmth rising in her chest. They moved together through the hall, where low lights and sophisticated furniture created an almost cinematic setting. Theo made a point of introducing her to some influential figures in the cultural scene, describing her as a new promise in music, a description that elicited a mix of embarrassment and gratitude from Vanessa. Amid smiles and glasses of champagne served with precision, Theo couldn't help but notice Vanessa's discomfort. Her eyes, almost always so bright when she composed or talked about music, flickered with the intense light of the spotlights and the muffled murmur of conversations. He approached her during a pause, in a quietly reserved space. "You don't have to pretend here," he said, almost a veiled request. "I know this world isn't easy for those who weren't born into it." She looked at him, surprised by the rare sincerity in his words. "You have no idea what it means to try to be heard when your name is whispered with disdain in the best salons." Theo squeezed her hand briefly, as if transferring part of his strength. "So tell me, Vanessa, what do you hope for all of this?" The question touched a sensitive spot. Tears threatened to escape, but she held them back with a trembling smile. "I want justice. I want my music to be my voice, and I want no one else to have to go through what I went through." And throughout the rest of the night, small provocations between them became charged with subtext. Theo challenged Vanessa to deconstruct prejudices with sharp humor, while she resisted, protecting her courage behind quick responses and defiant glances. There was an electric tension in the air, a silent dance where neither allowed their feelings to surface openly, but both felt the ground shifting beneath their feet. In a brief moment, while observing Theo's private art collection, Vanessa stepped back before a particular piece, a painting where the shadows seemed to hold painful secrets. "Why do you collect art like this?" she asked, half to herself, half to him. Theo sighed, the mask of distance falling for a moment. "Because, like you, I carry scars that can only be understood through something deeper." His voice was laden with a mix of melancholy and authenticity. Vanessa realized for the first time that the man behind the wealth and arrogance was also a vulnerable character in his own story. The revelation, though brief, opened a door between them, a silent trust they had so far hesitated to share. The night progressed, and with each sip of wine and exchange of glances, the distance between their worlds slowly diminished, but with enough intensity to transform the formality of an event into a promising prelude. As the party came to an end, Theo accompanied Vanessa to the exit, where the warm breeze of New York mingled with the distant sounds of cars and street conversations. He took off his sunglasses, allowing the brightness to bridge the gap between their gazes. "Maybe this isn't just a 5-minute charade," he murmured. She smiled, her heart racing, unsure if that invitation was a promise or just another step in the game they had begun. But it hardly mattered. Something had changed. In the silence that followed their farewell, Vanessa realized that, for the first time in a long time, she was not alone, and that this unexpected and complex presence could be what she needed to give her life a new direction. As she walked down the sidewalk, she felt the gentle breeze caress her face, carrying the distant scent of hope and what was yet to come. Tell us in the comments which scene has impacted you the most so far, and don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion makes all the difference. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel to follow this plot full of emotions and twists. The next morning seemed a challenge to Vanessa's senses. The grey sky of New York, heavy with clouds promising rain, matched the whirlwind swirling inside her. The dry scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the smell of freshly cut grass from the yard of the small house where she lived, but nothing could calm the storm of thoughts. She ran her fingers over the papers scattered on the table, unfinished scores, crumpled drafts, old concert tickets. All of it was her survival, her soul exposed in notes. And yet the judgment of the gallery elite lingered, whispered and cutting like an invisible knife. That day, news of the plagiarism exhibition spread like wildfire in unbearable heat. Social media buzzed with distorted versions of her supposed artistic betrayal, and the fallout threatened to swallow the truth. Vanessa felt the weight of the invisible voices, the relentless accusations, and her once timid smile faded. It was then that the phone rang. "Vanessa Smith," the deep, distant voice belonged to Theo. "I want you to come to my office. We need to talk. It's urgent." Without thinking twice, on several occasions she grabbed a jacket, felt the biting cold that the city offered her, and headed downtown, where the mirrored building of the Andersons seemed like a parallel universe, glass and steel reflecting light that felt so distant from her world. In the lobby, the cold air from the air conditioning enveloped her as she walked among hurried employees and staff who passed like ghosts. The elevator ascended quickly, carrying her racing heart with it. When the door opened, Theo was waiting for her with a serious expression, his impeccable suit contrasting with the crisis that seemed to gravitate between them. "Have a seat," he indicated the black leather chair, and any trace of arrogance fled from his eyes. "What happened, Theo?" she asked, her voice trembling, almost a plea. He opened a folder on the mahogany table, revealing documents, headlines, and screenshots of text messages. "A plagiarism accusation can destroy your career," he said firmly, "but I don't believe in coincidences. It seems this campaign was planned." Vanessa ran her hand over her face, trying to contain the pain that tightened her chest. "But why? Who would do this?" Theo leaned forward, the light reflecting off the glass of his glasses. "People who have an interest in maintaining the status quo. Music is their weapon, and they want to silence it." She swallowed her outrage, her heart pounding as if trying to break free from fear and insecurity. "And me? What can I do?" Theo smiled, a smile that mixed challenge with a subtle promise. "We're going to turn the tables." In the days that followed, Theo proved to be much more than a billionaire who merely collected art. He was a man determined to use his influence to protect those he believed were wronged. He began mobilizing his network of contacts, calling independent journalists, specialized lawyers, and music critics willing to hear the truth. Vanessa, for her part, felt the weight of the events. Her fear of exposure, of rejection from the wealthy society she deemed unattainable, began to feel too much to contain. Her fingers, once hesitant to touch the piano, now gained strength, as if the need to fight fueled her inspiration. On a rainy afternoon, while cups of coffee cooled on the table of her small apartment, Vanessa looked at Theo, who was sitting on the sofa, reviewing the latest news on his tablet. "Do you really believe this will end?" she asked. Her voice choked, mixing fatigue with hope. He paused, looking at her with uncommon sincerity. "I don't know if it will end," he said softly, "but I know that together we can make the future different from the past." There was a silence heavy with meaning, with hidden fears and unconfessed desires. It was in that moment that Vanessa realized that man, marked by his own ghosts, was not only protecting her from the external storm, but also making space for her to see herself in a new light, strong, capable, worthy of fighting for the place she wanted to occupy in the world. Nights passed, and the desire to compose returned to her with intensity. Music flowed from her fingers, turbulent notes reflecting pains, joys, conflicts, and the flame of a love that grew in the silence between her and Theo. However, not everything was easy. The public exposure that Theo was provoking began to disturb powerful allies, and Vanessa knew that every step toward the truth brought risks she had never imagined facing. On one of those days, while rehearsing her new composition, a note was left under the door. "Be careful. Not everything is as it seems." The air felt heavy, the shadows in the room elongated, and the certainty that the war was just beginning invaded her body. But Vanessa now was no longer alone. With Theo by her side, she felt a strength almost forgotten, a concrete desire to transform pain into power and fear into music. Fate had united them in that unlikely meeting, and even with adversarial territories and hidden secrets, the alliance shone like a beacon in the night. They knew the road would be long, filled with ambushes and twists, but also open to redemption, love, and the justice they both yearned for. And as the rain drummed against the window and the city followed its tireless rhythm, Vanessa held onto the certainty that her symphony was now an invincible melody. Tell us in the comments which moment in the story made your heart race the most, and don't forget to rate from 0 to 10. Your like and subscription to the channel make all the difference in continuing to bring these emotions to you. Leonard Smith was not a man who liked surprises, especially those that threatened his absolute control over business and the impeccable image he had cultivated for years. When his assistant called him with a tense look for an unexpected meeting in his office on the top floor of the building that dominated Fifth Avenue, he felt the slight tightening in his chest that came with bad news. The spacious area, with glass panels allowing a panoramic view of the grey city under the drizzle, felt colder than ever that early afternoon. "We have a problem, Mr. Smith," said the assistant, distributing frantic reports and screenshots from social media and news on digital portals. "Vanessa Smith is causing a stir again. The plagiarism story has turned into a much bigger scandal. The independent media is on her side, and her popularity could directly affect negotiations with investors." Leonard frowned, his fingers drumming irritably on the dark mahogany table. He could not allow something so minuscule, a former nurse and musician without status, to threaten his empire. He thought of his recent encounters with Vanessa, her determined gaze, the way she succumbed to the vulnerability not so hidden behind the challenges she faced. However, his pragmatic mind quickly pushed back any remnants of feeling. His strategy. It was necessary to be clear and quick to control the damage. That was when an unusual, almost irresponsible idea began to form. An idea where the enemy, Vanessa, could actually become the key piece to solve her problem with the unstable investors questioning her emotional stability. She called her secretary without wasting any time. "I want a meeting with Vanessa Smith today, and I won't accept refusals." On the other end of the line, the surprise was palpable, but there was no way to contest the mogul's order. Vanessa hesitated upon receiving the summons. A mix of shock and curiosity overwhelmed her. Cautiously, she prepared herself with the usual resistance that had cost her so much effort to build. The meeting marked a new chapter in her story, not as a victim, but as the protagonist in a plot she frequented without an invitation. Thus, when she entered Leonard Smith's office, the elegant and austere environment caused a mix of respect and a determined desire not to be intimidated in her chest. He awaited her with cold eyes, but there was something more in that expression, a proposal hidden behind the hardness. "Vanessa," he began, pushing aside a stack of documents, "I know you are facing a storm much bigger than you realize. And to be honest, I can say that you surprised me. You have courage." She lifted her chin. "I didn't come here for compliments." Leonard stepped forward, pulling a white envelope from his pocket. "I have a proposal for you." She stared at him intently. "A proposal?" "I will help you solve your financial problems," he said, his voice low and firm. "But in return, you will become my partner for 6 months. You will accompany me to my events, business dinners, and even some trips. The goal is to show my network that Leonard Smith is not available on the market, a facade if you prefer." Vanessa's hands trembled, doubt and distrust waging a silent battle in her eyes. "And what if I refuse?" He didn't look away. "You won't refuse. I know what it's like to love someone enough to swallow your own pride." A heavy silence settled in. Finally, she snatched the envelope from his hand, her voice trembling but determined. 6 months, not a day more." A slight smile crossed Leonard's face. "A contract will be prepared. You will receive it tomorrow." When he took 2 steps toward the elevator, her voice unexpectedly sounded soft. "Leonard." He stopped, looking over his shoulder. "Why are you doing this?" The question hung in the air like smoke. For a moment he almost answered honestly, almost revealed that there was something about her, a light that made him want to be more than the cold man he had become. Instead, he said, "Business, Vanessa, just business." And when the elevator doors closed, neither of them believed that lie. At that moment, the unusual alliance between the humble musician and the billionaire was sealed, ready to rewrite not only their lives but every expectation, every prejudice of that powerful society. As the fine rain continued to fall outside, the city said that the game had just begun. Tell us in the comments which moment of the meeting you found most impactful. Your rating from 0 to 10 is very important to us. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next twists of this story, full of emotion and struggle. The sun had not yet fully bid farewell when Vanessa woke up, an uncomfortable mix of anxiety and resignation filling her chest. The contract lay on the table in the small kitchen, its yellowed pages and tiny lines revealing an agreement she had never imagined accepting, even in her most troubled dreams. Each word seemed to carry a weight, an uncomfortable promise, 6 months of a necessary facade to save not only her career, but also her mother's health, a vulnerable point that Leonard had not let slip. She ran her fingers over the sheets, feeling the rough texture of the paper, her nose catching the faint aroma of the dried ink mixed with the fresh coffee escaping from the coffee maker. A smell that seemed to symbolize the hard days and tough decisions that awaited her. For a moment, she hesitated, her eyes fixed on the section that stipulated her social obligations. The elegant dinners in penthouses, the trips aboard private jets, mingling with names she had never imagined she would meet. But it wasn't just that which troubled her. It was the feeling of selling part of herself, a heart divided between who she was and who she could become. Will I be able to bear this mask? What if I lose myself along the way, she thought, her inner voice as critical and insecure as an unyielding judge. Still, there was a thin thread of hope that pulled her from the abyss of fear. The unexpected presence of Theo, with his cutting irony and gestures that sometimes disarmed her protective wall. Early in the morning, before the sun cast its first rays, the doorbell rang insistently. Vanessa opened the door to find Liam, Leonard's younger brother, a man with a warm, open smile who, unlike his brother, didn't wear ties or closed-off expressions. "Good. Ready for this unofficial carnival?" joked Liam, handing her an envelope with the original contract documents and an itinerary of the first events. She let out a tense but genuine smile, inviting him in. In the few minutes they spent together, Vanessa felt something genuine in that family of hard appearances, a rare slice of humanity in the universe of luxury and power. In the afternoon, when she met Theo at the most discreet cafe in Central Park, the air was heavy between them, charged with expectation and an almost palpable electricity. "Are you really going to accept this?" he asked, taking a sip of the strong espresso. She bit her lip, the words escaping. "It's not a choice. It's a necessity." Theo nodded, his eyes locked on hers. "Then just promise me one thing." "What?" He leaned in fearlessly, the woody fragrance of his perfume filling the space between them. "That despite everything, you won't lose yourself. That you will be you. No more, no less." Vanessa felt the world slow down, her heart racing. "I promise." But fate had its own designs. At the first dinner, held in the penthouse of the elegant neighborhood of Soho, the tension was inevitable. Vanessa, dressed in a stunning gown that weighed as much as her insecurities, walked alongside Leonard, under the scrutinizing gazes of New York's elite. She felt the subtle and expensive fragrance around her, a mix of spices, flowers, and power. The sound of glasses clinking, voices in low tones filled with secrets, and the sparkle of jewelry shone like distant stars, intensifying the feeling of being in a universe alien to her own. When a guest insinuated with an ironic smile that Leonard's new companion seemed more like a gamble than a real relationship, Vanessa swallowed the sharp response that bubbled in her throat. Instead, her hand found his under the table, a brief and firm touch that conveyed more words than 1,000 phrases. Later, alone on the balcony, her fingers trembled as she watched the city lights spread across the streets, points that seemed as alive as her hope for a fresh start. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Theo. "Are you okay?" he asked sincerely, that rare vulnerability making him more human. She sighed, the weight of the facade threatening to undermine her courage. "I'm learning. Every day is a battle, but I'm here." He smiled, pulling her close, his warm breath mingling with the coolness of the night. "If you need me, I'll be here. Always." But the battles weren't just social. The next morning, upon arriving at the makeshift studio in her apartment, Vanessa found a note pinned to the door. "Not all help comes from those who seem like friends." The cryptic warning cast shadows on her face. She knew that this game of appearances held dangerous traps, where trust could be the most expensive currency. Still, the melody in her heart intensified, blending pain and joy into notes that now echoed not only in her fingers, but also in the souls of all who heard her music. And so, wrapped in a plot where passion, power, and secrets intertwined, Vanessa prepared to face the next act. Still uncertain, but full of promises and dangers. The clock didn't stop, and time was running against them. But the symphony of life had just gained new chords. Tell us in the comments what you think will happen next. Your rating from 0 to 10 and your like show that you are with us on this journey. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters of this tale of love, struggle, and transformation. The dawn arrived slowly over New York, spreading a silent twilight that seemed to conceal the whispers surrounding Vanessa's life. The mysterious note, pinned to the door like a dark warning, weighed on her mind as her fingers glided over the newly composed melody. Notes that mingled with silent fears, a fear of those who know too much, yet still didn't want to surrender. That morning the sky scraped shades of grey and blue, while the persistent buzz of her phone announced the arrival of an unexpected message. It was Theo. "I need you to come with me. There's something you need to see." Vanessa felt her heart race, that dangerous mix of urgency and fear corroding her defenses. Without hesitation, she put on her jacket, the rough fabric contrasting with the softness of her skin, and set off to meet those words that promised revelations. Theo's car cut through the congested streets, the smell of leather and fresh coffee permeating the interior as the city lights rushed by like fleeting sparks. He kept his eyes fixed on the road, but the tension on his face betrayed the weight of the secret he carried. "What happened?" Vanessa asked, her voice low, almost fearing the answer. He took a deep breath, gripping the wheel tightly. "I discovered something that could change everything, about who is really behind what you're facing." They stopped in front of an old building, its walls carrying the weight of decades, and Theo pulled Vanessa inside. The smell of mold and old wood filled the air, creating a strange contrast with the cold glass corridors where she had spent so many days. They arrived at a stuffy room, illuminated by the pale light of a single lamp. On the table, scattered papers, documents that seemed more like clues to a puzzle. These are the records," Theo began, pointing to the spreadsheets, "of suspicious transactions from the company that is ruining your reputation. And it's not just any company. It's the branch of a conglomerate linked to people you know." Vanessa raised an eyebrow, her head spinning slowly. "No? How so?" Theo handed her a yellowed photograph. In it, a familiar figure was chatting amicably with a man she had seen a few times, at events where she herself had been invited to pretend to be Leonard's companion. Leonard's former press agent, Ryan, is involved. He sold information, manipulates people, and plays with others' careers for his own benefit. Vanessa's hand tightened around the photograph, shock mingling with anger. "So, he betrayed me?" Theo stepped closer, taking her hand in an uncertain and desperate gesture. "No, it's not that simple, but you need to be prepared for what's coming. In these times, nothing is what it seems." The chill in her veins was caused not just by the air conditioning, it was the certainty of being, in the midst of a web that went beyond what she imagined, a dirty game where allies and enemies blurred together. In the following days, as Vanessa immersed herself in meetings, events, and dinners with Leonard, their interactions took on an even more complex tone. Between cordial phrases and glances that held secrets, the chemistry pulsed beneath the surface, charged with unspoken tension and restrained desires. At one of these gatherings, during a glamorous party on the rooftop of Fifth Avenue, while the city sparkled with its multicolored lights, a moment froze time. Leonard held Vanessa's hand, the discreet pressure of his fingers electrifying her, as he murmured, "No matter what happens out there, here and now, I am by your side." She wanted to believe it, but the words clashed with the cruel world surrounding them. In the solitude of her room, late at night, Vanessa reviewed the documents that Theo had shown her, making cautious plans to avoid falling into the traps of hidden players. Each new detail revealed increased her determination, a sign that not only her career but her very identity was at stake. In conversations with Theo, defenses lowered, with silences speaking louder than words, glances chasing the impossible. Between the security he offered and the coldness Leonard displayed, Vanessa found herself torn, choosing paths that few would dare to tread. One afternoon, during a break in her frantic pace, she received an unexpected invitation for a private dinner, a sign that the game was about to enter a new phase. The tension in the air, the vague noise of footsteps in the hallway, the striking scent of white orchids around. All indicated that, despite the masks, no secret would remain hidden for long. And as the shadows of the past and the promises of the future intertwined, Vanessa prepared to decide who she truly was and what she was willing to sacrifice for love, for truth, and for freedom. Tell us in the comments which character you think will win Vanessa's heart for good and why. Your rating from 0 to 10 and your like are essential for us to continue delivering chapters full of emotion and incredible twists. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything from this engaging plot. The invitation arrived in a delicate envelope wrapped in white tissue paper with the minimalist crest of one of the most influential families in New York printed in gold at the top. Vanessa held it between her hands, feeling the weight of the decision approaching like a tight knot in her throat. The ornate handwriting on the invitation indicated an exclusive private dinner filled with the social conventions she had only interpreted from afar and never imagined being a part of. The night was clear, with the moon peeking through the treetops of the Upper East Side, as Vanessa wore an elegant dress that perfectly matched her mix of nervousness and determination. Beside her, Leonard Smith, always impeccable in his dark suit, seemed to defend his territory with an impenetrable aura. In the car that took them to the mansion, the silence between them spoke more than any word, creating a strange, almost palpable tension. As they passed through the immense gate, adorned with classical sculptures, they were greeted by a stern-looking butler who led them to the main hall. The intense aroma of white orchids and fine woods filled the space, accompanied by the soft sound of a string quartet in the background, an atmosphere that combined luxury and anticipation. As soon as they arrived, elegant faces turned toward them, whispers and evaluative glances making Vanessa feel both an intruder and a protagonist. The presence of the patriarch of the host family, a man with stern features and a calculating gaze, stood out for his vigor and imposing posture, a true symbol of the power that moved that elite. Leonard introduced Vanessa with a controlled smile, and his firm voice made the introduction echo throughout the room. "This is Vanessa Smith. She will be joining us in this new phase, a strategic partner." The impact of the introduction caused glances to cross, some surprised, others with veiled disbelief, but Vanessa maintained a steady gaze. She was no longer the shy woman who had gone through so many invisible battles. During dinner, as conversations revolved around business and alliances, Vanessa felt the weight of the power games, where every word and gesture were measured and analyzed. The food was a symphony of refined flavors, the fresh aroma of basil, the buttery touch of sage butter on the zucchini sprouts, the balanced taste of lemon risotto, all prepared to please discerning palates, but which mattered little in the complex board she was navigating. Leonard's eyes never left her, a mix of pride and possessiveness evident in every light touch of his fingers that dared to meet under the table. Vanessa responded, but her thoughts were divided. Theo, with his sincerity and silent support, crossed her mind, creating a conflict that gnawed at her spirit. In the dim light of the room, a subtle comment from the patriarch echoed like a sentence. "Those who truly win in power games are those who know when to take off their masks." Vanessa tried to disguise the tension that this phrase provoked. Her heart raced, aware that her secrets and true feelings could be revealed at any moment. After dinner, Leonard led her to the balcony, where the cool night breeze caressed their faces. The starry sky seemed to witness that delicate moment of vulnerability and strength. "I know it's not easy," he said softly, his hand enveloping hers. "But I'm here. Trust me." She swallowed the urge to ask if she could trust someone she had seen as an adversary until recently, but instead she opted for silence, letting the warmth of the touch and the unknown promise envelop her. That very night, upon arriving home, Theo called Vanessa, his voice heavy with urgency. "I need you to meet me tomorrow morning. Something important is happening, something that could change everything." She took a deep breath, knowing that her life no longer belonged to her, but to the cruelly captivating games she wove with all those who, for one reason or another, held their own wounds and secrets. As dawn approached, Vanessa realized she was closer to the point of no return, caught between love, betrayal, and the quest for justice. A path that, although unknown, was filled with the courage that had always come from within her. The symphony of her life now played dissonant and profound chords, discarding the old melodies of fear to make way for the powerful sound of a woman determined to fight for what she believed in. Tell us in the comments, which of these forces, Leonard, Theo, or your own destiny, do you think will guide Vanessa to victory? Rate it from 0 to 10, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to follow every step of this thrilling journey. The dawn barely touched the windows of Vanessa's apartment when the sound of her phone broke the silence. With trembling fingers, she answered with a brief, "Hello," trying to contain the anxiety that was exploding in her chest. On the other end, Theo's voice was deep and urgent. "Meeting at Cafe Central in 30 minutes. There's something you need to see in person, and it can't wait." In a rush, Vanessa slipped on her sneakers and threw on a light jacket, leaving behind the makeup and evening gown from the night before. The street was still empty, the lampposts casting long shadows, and the strong aroma of freshly brewed coffee from the small establishment was already enticing the first customers. Theo was waiting for her at a corner table, his gaze fixed on a black folder, carefully peeling back the curtain of mysteries. Before she even sat down, he slid a tablet closer, displaying numbers, graphs, and emails that challenged the trust she still held for her network around her. "Look at this," he said. "These are bank accounts, transfers, and forged contracts, all linked to the company trying to discredit you for shady interests." Vanessa felt her head spin as she tried to grasp the depth of the conspiracy. Her thoughts returned to the times she felt scrutinized during official events, the words left unspoken, and the suspicion that not everything was as it seemed. "And the worst part," Theo continued, "is that all of this has a common link. Ryan. He is the connection between the interests behind the shady dealings and some of your closest allies." She stared at the tablet, her heart pounding against her ribs like a silent marathon. Ryan, Leonard's former press agent, whom she once considered a safe shadow, was now revealing himself as a key player in a dirty game designed to destroy her. "How am I going to deal with this?" she murmured, more to herself than to Theo. "Carefully," he replied, wrapping his hand in a gesture that brought unexpected comfort. "But first, we need to take a step forward." As they left the cafe, the city began to awaken to a grey day, with heavy clouds promising rain. The fresh air brought a momentary relief, while Theo looked at her with an intensity that mixed concern and hope. "Vanessa, I know it's hard to trust anyone in this field, but I trust you. We're in this together." As they walked toward the parking lot, shadows subtly watched them from a distance, a cruel reminder that, in the elite circles of New York, the game never stops and danger lurks around every corner. The next afternoon, Vanessa sat in a cold conference room, surrounded by lawyers and advisors, carefully reviewing the evidence that could topple key pieces of the conspiracy. Leonard was by her side, his firm posture indicating more than anger over betrayals, an unstoppable determination to protect what was now not only her assets, but also her pride. The tension between them grew, but behind the restrained gestures, furtive glances revealed a connection that was beginning to emerge as something deeper than any professional alliance. "We will need irrefutable proof," he murmured, "and to protect you. This war is not just business, Vanessa." She nodded, her calm breath hiding the internal storms. Upon leaving that meeting, the sound of the fine rain falling on the glass made her thoughts drift back to her childhood and the mother she carried in memory despite the distance. The feeling of wanting to protect not only her family, but her very essence was now the driving force propelling her to face the darkness, even when everything seemed to conspire to suffocate her light. In that moment, in the car taking her home, Vanessa felt torn between the chaos around her and the hope blooming like the first flower of spring. And that night, under the bare lights of her apartment, she allowed herself to sigh, confident that, although the paths could be winding, her inner music would find a way to echo loud and clear, breaking barriers, healing wounds, and perhaps winning hearts. Tell us, what was the biggest turning point for you so far? Rate it from 0 to 10, leave a like, and subscribe to embark on every detail of this journey filled with emotions, secrets, and transformations. Your participation makes all the difference. The day dawned with a light fog enveloping the streets of New York, and Vanessa woke up caught between the fatigue and anxiety that had been taking over her routine. The hours since the meeting with Leonard had been filled with a whirlwind of thoughts and plans, but nothing could prepare her for what she would find when she answered the call that broke through mid-morning. "Vanessa, it's urgent. I need you to come to George's office immediately. We discovered something new." The voice. Theo's voice sounded grave and hurried. With no time for doubts, she quickly dressed, each movement charged with an energy that insisted on keeping her body alert. The taxi that took her crossed the avenue, where the first rays of sunlight filtered through the grey veil of clouds, leaving an alien glow on the facades of the buildings. In the lobby of the commercial building, George awaited her with a stern expression, his grey eyes revealing the urgency and weight of the news he had to share. Upon entering the meeting room, Vanessa found Theo and a data analyst holding a tablet filled with graphs and documents. "We found something that could completely change the game," George announced as he handed the tablet to Vanessa. On the screen, spreadsheets cross-referenced with recent financial movements showed a suspicious transfer made in the name of the shell company associated with Ryan, which transcended the known limits until now. But beyond that, there was a video recorded by a security camera near one of these transactions, revealing a figure that Vanessa knew all too well. A heavy silence settled in as everyone looked at her, holding the device with hands that, despite their outward steadiness, concealed an internal tremor. "It's him," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Ryan." The video showed in grainy images and muffled sound, Ryan entering a building and handing an envelope to another person whose face could not be identified. Those images not only confirmed his betrayal, but revealed a network of contacts that jeopardized the safety of everyone trying to help her. Theo approached Vanessa, his gaze a mix of concern and determination. "This implicates who helped you behind the scenes, Vanessa. We're dealing with something bigger than we imagined," he warned. Leonard, who had arrived shortly after, crossed his arms, staring at the screen with a grim expression. "We tried to underestimate the extent of the problem, but this requires us to be very careful," he said, his voice low and filled with cold calculations. Vanessa felt the weight of responsibility quicken her heartbeat. The options seemed scarce and dangerous, but there was something more she needed to confront: the risk that her own closest circle might be the weakest link. By the end of that afternoon, exhausted, she walked through the bustling streets of New York, the sound of cars and footsteps blending with her quickened breath. The unmistakable smell of warm pastries from a nearby stall brought momentary comfort, a taste of childhood she kept treasured. But even the mix of sweet memories and personal certainties could not hide the unease creeping inside her. That night, alone in her apartment, Vanessa felt the walls closing in around her. The phone vibrated with an unexpected message. "I'll meet you tomorrow. We need to talk. L. Leonard." The name pulsed on her phone screen like a call, a promise, a riddle, and for a moment she allowed herself to imagine a future where the masks could finally fall away, and what remained would be authentic and sincere. However, the ghosts of distrust and fear whispered that nothing would be simple, and the war she faced spared no hearts. Vanessa leaned against the window, watching the city that never slept, illuminated by thousands of lives crossing paths and similar dilemmas. The decision lay before her, to follow the instinct that led her to open up to Leonard or to protect herself from the possible falls that intimacy could bring. But deep down, she knew that life would not wait for her answer. The game continued, and she needed to choose her move quickly. Tell us, do you think Vanessa should get closer to Leonard or be suspicious and pull back? Give us your rating from 0 to 10, leave your like and subscribe to the channel to dive with us into this story where love and betrayal dance a dangerous dance. Your voice is essential for this plot to stay alive. The alarm clock rang with an almost cruel insistence, interrupting the silence that still enveloped Vanessa's apartment. She stretched slowly, letting the pale light of dawn flood the room, while the weight of the decision awaiting her made her heart pound in her chest like a distant drum. Leonard's message seemed to vibrate on her phone screen, calling her for a conversation that promised to be more than just a mere alignment of matters. It was an invitation to confront hidden fears and old wounds. In the modest kitchen, coffee began to drip through the filter, releasing a strong and comforting aroma. Vanessa adjusted her hands, feeling the cold touch of the ceramic cup her mother had given her years ago, a simple gift she cherished. The bitter taste of coffee mingled with the sweetness of the freshly baked pastry she had warmed in the oven, a small ritual that helped her balance the turmoil forming inside her. Dressed in slightly worn jeans and the knitted top her grandmother had hand-embroidered, Vanessa stepped out into the vibrant streets of New York. The air carried the smell of wet asphalt, fresh from the dissipating drizzle, and was also perfumed by the scent of the trees lining Fifth Avenue. The noise of cars blended with the distant murmur of pedestrians, a urban symphony that, at that moment, seemed like a soundtrack for the anticipation tightening her chest. Upon arriving at the cozy restaurant with a discreet facade and low lighting, she hesitated for a moment at the door, lifting her eyes to the cloudy sky that threatened more rain. Her heart raced between hope and fear. She took a deep breath and entered the space that awaited her with a subtle aroma of spices and fine wood, growing in the tense and delicate atmosphere. Leonard was waiting for her at a table in the corner, relaxed in posture, although his eyes sparkled with an unusual intensity. The energy emanating from him seemed to cross the space between them. "Vanessa," he began, rising to greet her with a restrained smile, "thank you for accepting the invitation. I want you to know that what we have today is much more than a business conversation. It's a step towards something that perhaps we both fear to admit." She felt his hand envelop hers in a firm yet gentle touch, his fingers warming hers. The delicate aroma of Leonard's woody fragrance invaded her senses as her breath became short and her heart raced at a pace she couldn't control. "I want to be honest," she replied with a half-smile. "Not knowing whether to trust has kept me awake at night. The fear is great, but perhaps it's precisely that fear that pushes me forward." They ordered fresh orange juice and a spinach pie to share. But what truly filled the table was the silence heavy with meaning, the pauses between words, and the glances that spoke more than any phrase. Leonard spoke about his fears, the losses he hid behind the mask of a successful businessman, and the ghosts that haunted him in the corridors of high society. Vanessa listened to each confession as if peeling layers to reach the essence. "Do you realize how vulnerable we are, even when we try to be strong?" he murmured, his voice soft. "Perhaps the secret is to accept this imperfection instead of fighting against it." She nodded, a shy smile breaking through the storm. But just as she was about to respond, the persistent vibration of her cell phone shook the moment, tearing through the atmosphere like a sharp knife. The name flashing on the screen brought a shadow of fear, an urgency that allowed no slips. With a sigh, she explained, trying not to show how much the call had shaken her. "It's something related to our fight, to people who need me. I can't step away now." Leonard nodded, understanding the boundary that existed between them, an invisible wall that still needed to be respected. As they left the cozy restaurant, thick drops began to fall from the heavy sky, soaking the sidewalk, the hurried footsteps, and the urban scenery wrapped in the golden reflections of the streetlights. Vanessa felt the rain wet her hair and skin, as if the city were washing away doubts and fears, preparing the ground for a fresh start. In that moment, she knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. That risk lurked around every corner. But she also had clarity that she would prevent her heart from pacing fear with hope, because sometimes what arises from the impossible is exactly what can save. Tell us, do you believe that this sincere conversation could be the first step toward true love between Vanessa and Leonard? Rate from 0 to 10, leave your like, and subscribe to follow closely as revelations, secrets, and emotions intertwine in this passionate plot. Your opinion is vital for this story to come to life. The morning dawned grey, as if the city reflected the silent turmoil that dominated Vanessa's chest. Upon opening her eyes, the weight of the last hours still enveloped her, like a thick fog that wouldn't give way to lightness. The conversation from the previous night, Leonard's words, the mutual confessions that unveiled an insecure yet sincere essence, spun in her mind at an almost deafening rhythm. In the modest kitchen of her apartment, Vanessa prepared coffee with mechanical movements, her eyes fixed on the window, where New York awakened to its own dilemmas. The strong aroma of coffee mingled with the morning scent of the street. Wet earth from the recent rain met the distant perfume of late spring flowers. She saw taxi drivers risking their horns amid the noise of crowded buses and the murmur of hurried pedestrians trying to dodge the relentless clock. Each carried their worlds, their urgencies. The cell phone vibrated abruptly, cutting through the tranquil morning demeanor. It was Theo, her right-hand man in the fight against the corruption that corroded the structures behind the social curtains. "Vanessa, I need you to come to headquarters, urgently. There's something new, but we can't hesitate." The message carried weight, a warning for the dark times that were intensifying. Dressed in worn jeans and a simple T-shirt, she left without hesitation, facing the city that seemed to activate all her senses. The chill of the breeze mixed with the muffled sound of rain still falling on some corners. The smell of oil and gasoline fused with the sweetness of ripe fruit sold at the traffic light stalls. In the gleaming glass building in the financial heart of the city, she found Theo and George already gathered. Theo's gaze, usually determined, now revealed a dark concern. "We found discrepancies in the latest financial audits," he explained. "It seems that even while away, Ryan continued to manipulate the clock hands. There are people betting that he won't stop easily." The atmosphere thickened around them like a storm about to explode, papers and charts shedding light on a web of interests and betrayals. "If we bring this to light, it will shake not only companies," George added, "it will affect families. And we can't forget that there are powerful people investing to keep everything secret." Vanessa felt the cold sweat on her neck, but she knew there was no room for fear here. It was the battle she chose, even if it came at a high cost. Leonard arrived slowly, his face closed as if he carried not only business but also the weight of existence itself. His gaze met hers, and in that brief, silent encounter there was a promise of support. Also, a shared vulnerability. "I will devise a plan," he announced, displaying encrypted files on his cell phone. "Every step will be calculated to avoid any deadly slip." The meeting continued with tension rising in the room, like an orchestra preparing for the crescendo. Every word, every decision carried the urgency of the moment. As she said goodbye to her colleagues, Vanessa felt the aroma of the cool rain enveloped the city, a scent that mixed wet earth and pine resin. In the bustling streets, the contrast of urban life with its social dilemmas reflected back at her. The taxi driver spoke, almost without noticing, about the growing inequality, the injustices that seemed to permeate every corner. She listened with a tired smile, feeling part of that complex web of New York that she loved and that had hurt her so many times. Upon arriving at her apartment, a harsh news awaited her. Her mother had fallen ill, a victim of the healthcare system that had threatened her family so many times. Tears fell silently, not from defeat, but from an indignant strength that gave her more reason to fight. The phone vibrated again. It was a message from Leonard. "If you need me, I'll be here. We don't face the battle alone." The words resonated within her, awakening a new feeling, a flame almost forgotten that promised warmth despite the cold of the night. Vanessa closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the tears that insisted on coming, mixing with the icy air that entered through the slightly open window. That decision made her human, to accept help, to allow herself to trust, even though the ground was uncertain and fraught with danger. The silence that night was complicit, giving space for courage to blossom. Tell us, how do you evaluate this moment when Vanessa opens up to Leonard, leaving behind fear and pride? Rate it from 0 to 10, leave your like, and subscribe to dive with us into every step of this journey filled with emotion, struggle, and love. Your opinion is what keeps this story alive and vibrant. The city presented itself in damp tones, the raindrops from the night still trickling down the fogged windows of Vanessa's apartment. In that small refuge in the heart of New York, silence took over, permeated only by the rhythmic ticking of the old clock on the wall. She wandered between thoughts that hurt and calmed in contradictory waves, trying to decipher how to make the next move on the complex board her life had become. Her tired eyes fixed on the frame on the living room table, where her mother smiled, a woman who, despite the world's adversities, always emanated strength and tenderness. The light scent of chocolate truffle, which she had tried to prepare the previous afternoon, still lingered in the air, a sweet reminder that contrasted with the bitterness that insisted on gnawing at her soul. Vanessa learned to be resilient. The scars, both physical and emotional, were marks she wore as an invisible armor. But that rigidity was beginning to give way to a more fragile yet powerful feeling, the possibility of letting go of the solitary struggle, of allowing Leonard, with his world of glass and privileges, to slip through a crack into her life. The next morning, the pale light announced a new day, but uncertainty lingered like a shadow. Vanessa knew that the true battle was not only against external enemies, those who manipulated documents, betrayed trust, and traded the soul of justice, but also against internal ghosts, the ghosts of doubt, fear, and wounded pride. When the phone vibrated again, a chill ran down her spine. It was a message from him, simple and direct. "Vanessa, you know I'm here. Today we can try something different. Meet me at the office at 5 p.m. I need to show you something." At that moment, the clock's hands seemed to speed up, increasing the pressure of time that was running against her and her plans. Vanessa decided to accept the call, not without first putting on the grey wool sweater that had belonged to her grandmother, the same one that had embraced her on stormy nights, a hug she now sought within herself. Upon arriving at Leonard's office, an imposing concrete and glass tower reflecting the first rays of sunlight, she felt the usual pulse of doubts and expectations. The sunlit corridor cut through the air like a blade, and her heart raced with each step toward his room, a minimalist space where discreet luxury contrasted with the austere reality of business. Leonard awaited her with a faint smile and a black folder in hand, which made his eyes shine in an unusual way. When he spoke, his voice was low, heavy with weight. "The truth is here, Vanessa. It's not just numbers. They are faces, lives," he said, opening the folder to reveal compromising photos and documents. "Now that we know the size of the enemy, we can act with surgical precision." She stepped closer, feeling his proximity like an electric current coursing through her skin. For a moment, the remaining times between them ceased to exist. Only that blend of struggle and desire, of hope and fear. "This battle could destroy everything," she admitted. including what we are building. Are you ready for that risk? Leonard took her hand, firm and warm. I don't know if I'm ready for all the consequences, but I know that being by your side is worth that uncertainty. Before they could deepen that moment, the sudden entrance of Sarah, the impatient and cold assistant, broke the tension. Her mischievous yet sly gaze brought unexpected news. An important dinner, hosted by investors who wanted to ensure support and for which the couple's presence would be indispensable. Vanessa felt the weight of the heavy social trap on her shoulders. She knew that this would be a test, where truth and appearances would dance on a tightrope over an invisible precipice. She looked at Leonard, who was already watching her as if unraveling hidden secrets, and tried to smile, even though the flutter in her stomach betrayed the vulnerability hidden within. I accepted your invitation because I trust you, but I promise nothing. Trust, Vanessa, is all we have right now, he replied, tightening her hand. That approaching night, they ascended together in the elevator that would take them to the brightly lit hall full of guests, where social masks and hidden intentions promised to reveal what they would be willing to sacrifice for power and love. Tell us, how do you think Vanessa and Leonard will navigate this situation? As they faced this social challenge, was their trust enough to navigate the game of appearances and betrayals? Rate it from 0 to 10, leave a like, and subscribe to keep following this story filled with tension, passion, and twists. Your participation is the force that keeps this narrative alive. The hall pulsed with soft lights and tense murmurs as valuable crystal glasses clinked around, reflecting the golden chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Vanessa felt the fabric of her black silk dress glide against her skin, a curious contrast between the apparent luxury and the unease that harked back to her difficult childhood in the city's outskirts. Beside her, Leonard looked impeccable, the dark suit tailored to his firm body, his sharp gaze seeming to cut through the crowd in search not only of investors, but also of potential threats camouflaged in false smiles and calculating looks. He squeezed her hand with a mix of possessiveness and silent encouragement. Remember, we are not what they expect. We are the unknown that can turn the game, he murmured in her ear, the warmth of his breath caressing her skin. Vanessa took a deep breath, the light scent of jasmine in the hall mingling with Leonard's classic fragrance, forming an aura that enveloped her senses. Conversations intertwined with restrained laughter and incisive comments about projects and investments. Most they were unaware of the true intentions behind the unlikely union of a humble woman and a business magnate. Vanessa, in turn, sensed the traps camouflaged in courtesies and false compliments. As soon as they arrived, Sarah, with her cynical, acidic smile, introduced Vanessa to some influential names. Each introduction made the young woman feel a tightening in her stomach, a silent battle between the desire to show her authenticity and the imperative need to control appearances. "Ah, the famous Vanessa, Leonard's muse," a female voice whispered to her left, laden with disguised contempt. Vanessa turned, the intriguing woman's eyes piercing her like subtle blades. "At least I am real," Vanessa retorted, her voice low but firm, earning a surprised smile from Leonard, who watched her with veiled pride. Throughout the night, glances alternated between them. Someone was watching, someone was suspicious. When Leonard pulled Vanessa aside, near the panoramic windows revealing the foggy skyline of the city, he spoke in a tone that mixed urgency and tenderness. "They will try to destabilize us, provoke jealousy, mess with what we hold most fragile. Don't let that separate us. I'm here because I believe, even with fear. But sometimes that line between the game and reality confuses me," she confessed, the shine of tears almost threatening to escape. It was at that moment that a tall, well-dressed man approached with a smug smile. His gaze was a mix of challenge and provocation. "Leonard, always a pleasure. I see you've brought an interesting companion." "And you are?" Leonard replied rudely, his low voice releasing a flexible tension in the air. "They call me Henry, a rather interested investor in the success of your operations." I hope we can talk later, alone." Vanessa felt the weight of that word success, laden with ulterior motives. She knew this dinner held traps that went far beyond social protocols. When they returned to the hall, she noticed their hands were firmly intertwined. "This Henry is dangerous, but he is not alone," Leonard murmured, his expression tense. Throughout the night, veiled provocations turned into subtle strategies to wear them down, imposing doubts and tests of trust. Vanessa had to control the impulse to pull away, to hide behind the painful past she carried in her baggage. At the most tense moment, when a group came to question Vanessa's origins and her arrangement with Leonard, she took a deep breath and positioned herself with surprising strength. "I am not a plan, nor a facade. I am a person, and I am here because I chose this path." A silence reverberated in the room, followed by a growing murmur. Immediately, Leonard held her at the waist, a silent gesture indicating he was by her side, unconditionally. As the night came to an end, the silent corridors and the yellowed lights of the city illuminated their exit. Vanessa and Leonard walked side by side, their complicity renewed and their eyes alert. "It won't be easy," he admitted, "but if we can get through this trial, nothing can bring us down." She smiled, feeling determination burn in her chest like a revitalizing flame. "Together, we face whatever comes." But in that moment, under the overcast sky, they sealed not just an alliance, but the beginning of something much greater. The construction of a love shaped by courage, struggle, and sincerity amidst the game of masks and the weight of buried secrets. Tell us, what was the most striking moment of this night for you? How do you see the future of our protagonists in light of the challenges ahead? Rate it from 0 to 10, leave a like, and subscribe to continue following this intense plot filled with contradictory emotions and surprising twists. Your participation is essential for this story to keep coming to life. The early morning draped over New York in a dense and silent fog, muffling almost all the sounds of the city that never sleeps. In the refuge they now shared, Vanessa and Leonard immersed themselves in a space where time seemed to slow down, granting them the urgency of a meeting that went beyond the ordinary. The apartment, with its wide windows overlooking the urban expanse, held a delicate moment, almost sacred, amidst the whirlwind of their lives. Vanessa sat on the upholstered sofa, her fingers still warmed by the scent from the event they had left behind. The black silk dress, which elegantly hugged her curves, now felt like a second skin, hiding the nervousness and vulnerability of that intense night. With a careful movement, she removed the high heels. The relief of bare feet touching the cold floor was immediate and almost liberating. Leonard stood by the window, his eyes fixed on the overcast sky, where the city lights twinkled, telling stories of dreams and battles. His face, sometimes illuminated by the soft glow of streetlights, bore the recent marks of emotional exhaustion. That powerful man, who often hid his true self behind formalities and masks, now showed a crack, a subtle trace of fatigue that only Vanessa seemed capable of seeing. "Today wasn't just another test, Vanessa," he began, his voice low and heavy with honesty. "It was a battle of wills, of authenticity. Your courage impressed me in ways you can't even imagine." She smiled, a gentle smile, almost trembling, bringing with it the relief of feeling seen for who she truly was. "And you," she replied, looking at him with admiration, "didn't shy away from your own vulnerabilities. I saw a less guarded man, someone trying to be more genuine, despite the world demanding armor." He turned, his expression softening, eyes searching hers for a reflection of what they were both trying to understand in that moment. "The mask is tiring, Vanessa," he confessed, stepping closer. "And you make me want to take it off, even knowing it might leave me too exposed." The silence that followed was heavy with emotions easy to feel but hard to name. It was as if time stood still between them, making each breath a silent promise, the subtle touch of fingers intertwining, the warmth rising up their spines, the quickening breath. Everything conspired to make the moment memorable. And it was in that instant that Leonard's phone vibrated forcefully, breaking the intimacy they had created. Without needing to look, he knew who it was. The message from the board didn't bring good news. The conflict with Ryan, the relentless rival, was closer than they had imagined. Leonard's gaze hardened, evoking a mix of frustration and determination. Vanessa felt the thin air in the room, the chill of responsibility entering strongly, but also a renewed courage. She chose, in that moment, to stay by his side, ready to fight for the battles to come. The following days were a fast-paced mix of meetings, urgent phone calls, and decisions that seemed to shape not only their destiny, but the future of those around them. Vanessa faced suspicious glances and veiled judgments, while Leonard fought to break down the barriers that fear and pride had erected around his own heart. On a grey afternoon, when the rain washed the city streets, they were gathered in a conference room. Dim light filtered through the windows, reflecting off smooth surfaces and creating shadows that danced delicately on the walls. Vanessa gazed at Leonard, her expression firm and determined, the same one that had propelled her from the start. "No matter what they try to throw against us," she spoke with conviction, "we will not yield to the pressures. We have something that no one can buy or destroy, the truth and the courage that unites us." He smiled, feeling for the first time in a long time that this young woman wanted more than a convenient alliance. She wanted to build something real, genuine. "You are my anchor," he replied, taking her hand gently. "Amidst the storm, your light guides me." In the small details of everyday life, that love grew stronger. Unexpected messages arriving on their phones bringing comfort, hot coffee shared between exhausting meetings, the fleeting touch of hands when their fingers crossed involuntarily. Each gesture spoke more than 1,000 words, building a solid foundation for a still fragile relationship, yet true. But even amidst these moments of tenderness, the shadows of the past and the threats of the present did not dissipate easily. Until, on what seemed like a routine day, news arrived like a punch in the gut, a revelation coming from the corridors of power, full of betrayals and secrets lurking, capable of shaking the bond of trust that Vanessa and Leonard had worked so hard to build. They remained silent for minutes that felt like hours, staring at each other, unsure how to react to the turmoil looming on the horizon. It was the toughest test yet, a trial that required both of them to look beyond the pain and fear to find a new form of courage. The future of their story was still an unknown, but one thing was clear. As long as they stayed together, no obstacle would be too great to overcome. Tell us, how do you see the evolution of Vanessa and Leonard from this moment? Do you believe their love will be able to overcome the betrayals and fears that surround their lives? Rate from 0 to 10, leave your like, and subscribe to continue following this intense plot, capable of moving and surprising at every chapter. Your participation is the strength that keeps this story alive, vibrant, and unforgettable.